things out that we don't have to look at. Next slide. Choices. If you don't have choices, you don't have a decision to make. So what are the real choices? We looked at, we could have rented. We said no to that one. We ended up with sort of three families of choices. Do we go live in the city? Do we live in a big house with no view? Or do we live in a smaller house with a view? I mean, that sort of came down to our three choices. Next. Knowledge. Knowledge is, people think about knowledge as what you know, but knowledge is much more for decision making. Knowledge is what you don't know because there are no facts about the future. And as much as we studied school districts, we could never know the quality. So when you think about knowledge, you don't think about, well, the answer is 8. You think, well, 1 time in 10, it could be as high as 15, 1 time in 10 as low as 11. So that range of uncertainty that adds the risk to your return. So if I were to ask you, what is the impact of the Affordable Care Act on your number of people employed in your organization 3 years from now, what is your answer? Well, could be as high as this, could be as low as that. That's the way you think about uncertainties in the future. You don't agonize over, well, it's going to be 3% more, 7% less. Okay, it's not a very useful way to think about it. You think about how low could it go, how high could it go. Next. Evaluation. How do each of the things we can rate on the things we want? How does living up by Harriet's office do in her commute? Does very well. How does it do on access to nature? Not so well because you're renting in the city. Okay, so that's just ranking the choices against your objectives. Next. Is everyone needed for successful execution aligned and committed? Which raises the question, aligned and committed to what? What is a decision? We've been talking about decisions all night, but I haven't defined it yet. You ever go to a meeting and you got all the big folks there and you're presenting and they're going, yeah, the heads are nodding? You leave the meeting and nothing ever happens? So heads nodding is not a decision. Maybe 90% of the way there, but it's not a decision, is an allocation of resources that you can't undo. Until you've allocated the resources, you haven't decided. Next slide. So if you decide, and then decide again when it's time to invest, you never decided the first time. Because it's the commitment of resources, dollars and people, that is what it is, that is the definition of a decision. So think sometimes, how, when things don't go well, ask yourself, did we ever really decide? Everyone was nodding, everyone seemed to be in agreement, but we never funded it. We never gave anyone time to make it happen. Right? Next. Do we have the right people involved? Do we have are we making this decision in a way that makes sense for us? Now, what makes sense for many people are consensus. Let's try and get everyone to agree. Okay? And I'm going to tell you the consensus is not just ineffective, it's not just poor process, it's evil. The dictionary defines evil as harmful or injurious, and consensus is both. Next slide. Consensus holds an organization hostage to its least visionary, least creative, and least risk-taking person. It leads to endless meetings trying to reach consensus, and if you ever get there, no one can agree on a contingency plan, so you're stuck. So one of the most important decisions you're going to have to make about your decision is who gets a vote. If you give 20 people a vote and say we need to get consensus on those 20, it's going to take a long time and everything's going to get watered down. You're not going to have anything left at the end. Okay? So who should make a decision next? Let me talk first about, let me go over this. I'll talk about who should make the decision, but let me talk about consensus for a bit. Go to the next slide. You go to a conference, and there are 8 executives, 8 physicians at the conference, and there are 4 restaurants within walking distance. Where do you go to eat? There's a Korean hot pot, a sushi, an Italian, and an Indian. Raise your hand. How many people think you want the hot pot? Sushi? Italian? Indian. It's actually a bigger spread. Normally, people go with Italian. Italian's the safest. Is anyone going to be confused as to how to eat the food? Anyone afraid of meatballs? Oftentimes we think about how many dinners you have that end up to be Italian. Why? Because that's unlikely to offend anybody. It's the thing we can all agree to. Okay? But it also makes it probably not going to stand out. Not going to be highly memorable. Okay? But too often we don't worry about getting highly memorable. We just say, how can we not have anyone upset? Next one. Let me try this one. How long will it take to get consensus so that the chicken will vote for Colonel Sanders? So I'm thinking about working with you to shut down your group and let your people go, and I want to get consensus on that. How's that going to work? You can get consensus on the mild, but not the wild. Okay. So when you think about decision making, you have to think about who's going to have a vote. Next slide. Here's the rule for decision making. And if you start with this rule, if you do nothing else for after tonight, I'll ask you to do two things. One, think about what the givens are for your decision. Two, ask yourself, who should make the decision? And here's the rule. Decisions should be made. Now normally they go way high up in this. They go way too many people involved and they go way too high up in the organization. But here's who should make a decision. The smallest group, which might be one woman, doesn't have to be a group, it could be one person, at the lowest level, with this caveat, if they collectively agree, they're unlikely to be overruled. The smallest group at the lowest level, such if they collectively agree, they're unlikely to be overruled. Now for the home buying decision, that was Harriet myself. It didn't include Nina. It didn't include her mother. She was not in the smallest group at the lowest level. Now how many of you are U of U affiliated in some way? Okay. Vivian is the vice president at the U of U. For how many decisions is Vivian the smallest group at the lowest level, such that they collectively agree they're unlikely to be overruled? For how many decisions would Vivian Lee fit that definition? 4 or 5. Very few. And yet, how many decisions do you think go up to her? Hundreds. So what happens when you push decisions all the way up because you don't have them made where they should be made? You push them all the way up, and all of a sudden you have the senior people deciding on things which for them are just small potatoes. They're 1/100th of the size of the issues she's really being paid to deal with. She doesn't know anything about the specifics, and she's not going to take any time. Why should she? It's just a tiny thing. You've got to push decision making down to that smallest group at the lowest level because they're the ones who care about that decision. For them it's material. They know about it. That's the group you want. Next. So which of the 7 attributes limits the quality of your decision? There's always one rate limiting step. Which of the 7 limit the quality of a decision? And the answer is whichever of the 7 is the weakest for that particular decision. What if you have great work on 6, but you had bad knowledge, garbage in, garbage out? Great work on 6, but you had bad structuring, you solved the wrong problem. Great job on 6, but you had the wrong people, you get the right answer, nobody cares, nothing happens. So the quality of a decision is defined by whichever of these 7 is the weakest. The problem is, we tend to work on what we know how to do, and we're good at it. To achieve decision quality, you have to work on your uncomfortable weaknesses, not necessarily your comfortable strengths. Next slide.
Hence the crime.
Hence the crime. We're going to rate these red, yellow, green, stoplight. If you're red on one of the 7 attributes, you're not ready to decide. You probably don't know the right questions, much less the right answers. If you're yellow, things are still changing, proceed with caution. If you're green, go. More work wouldn't be worth its cost. If you ever wonder when is enough enough, eventually you get to the point where more work wouldn't be worth its cost, and you're green. Next. Here's an example from one of my clients that went through a decision on 4 meetings. They came out of this first meeting. Is that a good place to be or a bad place to be after the first meeting?
It's not bad.
Not bad? I got bad or not bad? Which one is it?
I think it's not bad.
How upset am I that I don't have my evaluation done at that initial meeting?